Some debts can never be paid with money, only with truth. When a mother dies and her son is left with nothing but questions, those questions can haunt a man for a lifetime. Elias Carter spent 15 years in the mountains trying to forget Silver Creek and the night his mother died in their old family home. But some things cannot be forgotten. When he finally returned to rebuild the house everyone said was cursed, he discovered his mother's death was no accident. Beneath the rotting floorboards and behind crumbling walls lay secrets that would shake the entire town. What he found would force good people to face an ugly truth they had buried for years. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The road from the high country down to Silver Creek took 2 days on horseback, and Elias Carter rode it in silence. He had made this journey only once before in 15 years, the day he left after burying his mother. Now at 33, he was coming back to a place he had sworn never to see again. The mountains behind him still held snow on their peaks, even in late summer. Up there in his cabin by the cold stream, life had been simple. He trapped in winter, hunted when he needed meat, and kept company with silence. The quiet had been a balm after the noise of grief, after the whispers and sidelong glances of people who knew more than they would say. But 3 nights ago, he had dreamed of his mother. Not the frail, frightened woman she had become in those final months, but the younger version. Strong hands kneading bread, dark hair pulled back, humming hymns while she worked. In the dream, she had looked at him with those clear grey eyes and said simply, "It's time." He woke, knowing what she meant. It was time to go home, time to face what he had run from. The pine forests gave way to scrub oak, then to the rolling grasslands that surrounded Silver Creek. The town sat in a wide valley where 2 streams converged, founded during the silver boom 40 years back. The mines had played out long ago, but the town persisted, cattle ranching, freight stops, the steady business of people who had nowhere else to go. Elias saw the church steeple first, white paint faded to grey. Then the false front buildings of Main Street, the bank, the general store, the Silver Creek Hotel. Nothing had changed much. Towns like this rarely did. He rode in just before noon. The summer sun beat down hard, making the dust shimmer. A few people were about. Women with market baskets, a boy leading a mule, 2 old men sitting outside the barber shop. They all stopped to stare as he passed. Elias kept his eyes forward, but he felt their recognition. The Carter boy, all grown up, the one who left and never came back. Until now, he dismounted outside the boarding house, a 2-story structure with a sagging porch. Mrs. Calloway had run it for as long as Elias could remember. She was sweeping the steps when he approached, and she paused, broom in hand, studying him. "Elias Carter," she said finally. Her voice was neutral, giving nothing away. "Mrs. Calloway." He removed his hat. "I need a room for a few weeks, maybe longer." She looked him over. The worn trail clothes, the rifle in its saddle scabbard, the bedroll tied behind the cantle. A man who lived rough and traveled light. "You planning to stay in town?" she asked. "Planning to work on the old place," he said. "My mother's house." Something flickered across her face. Not quite fear, but close to it. "That house has been empty a long time, Elias. Most folks think it ought to stay that way." "Most folks don't own it," he said quietly. "I do, and I aim to fix it up." Mrs. Calloway was quiet for a long moment. Then she nodded. "I have a room. 2nd floor faces the street. 50 cents a night, meals included if you want them. That'll do fine." She showed him up, a narrow room with a bed, a washstand, and a window overlooking Main Street. It was clean and plain, which suited him. He paid for a week in advance and carried his gear up. When he came back down, Mrs. Calloway was in the kitchen preparing the noon meal. He paused in the doorway. "Mrs. Calloway, I wanted to ask, did you know my mother well?" She turned, her weathered hands dusted with flour. For the first time, her expression softened. "I did, Elias. Sarah was a good woman, kind to everyone, no matter their station. She used to bring me vegetables from her garden, more than I could use. Said she liked to see things grow." Mrs. Calloway's eyes grew distant. "She loved that house, loved that garden. It near broke her heart when she stopped, seemed to reconsider. Well, that was a long time ago. When what? Elias asked gently, but the walls came back up. Mrs. Calloway returned to her dough, kneading with sudden vigor. Just hard times is all. We all had hard times back then. Now dinner's at 6 sharp if you want it. Elias knew when a door had closed. He thanked her and left. He spent the afternoon purchasing supplies at the general store. The owner, Thomas Brennan, was a thick-shouldered man with a calculating look. He tallied Elias's purchases, nails, lumber, tar paper, tools, without speaking more than necessary. "Heard you're working on the Carter place," Brennan said as he wrapped the items. News traveled fast in small towns. "That's right. Place is a wreck. Might be better to tear it down, start fresh." "Might be," Elias agreed. "But I prefer to work with what's there. Build on the old foundation." Brennan's eyes narrowed slightly. "Sometimes old foundations are rotted through. Can't support new weight." The words felt like more than carpentry advice, but Elias just nodded. "I'll make sure it's solid before I build on it." A younger man, Mexican, was stacking crates in the back. He glanced at Elias, then quickly away, but not before Elias saw something in his face, sympathy maybe, or recognition of shared grief. Elias loaded his supplies onto the small wagon he had rented and drove out to the property. The Carter homestead sat a half-mile beyond town, where the land began to rise toward the foothills. It had been a good location once, close enough for convenience, far enough for peace. Now it looked like a place time had given up on. The house was small, just 4 rooms, kitchen, sitting room, 2 bedrooms. The roof sagged in the middle, shingles missing in patches. The porch steps had rotted through. Windows were broken, door hung crooked on its hinges. Weeds grew waist-high in what had been the garden, and the old well housing had collapsed. Elias stood there a long time, hands in his pockets, taking it in. He remembered his mother planting roses by the porch, remembered sitting on those steps while she read to him from her Bible, her voice steady and sure. Remembered the smell of her cooking, the sound of her laughter, the way she hummed while she worked, and he remembered the last time he saw her alive. She'd been drawn and worried, dark circles under her eyes. She had hugged him tight and said, "Whatever happens, Elias, know that I love you. And know that some things matter more than safety." He had been 18 and stupid, and he hadn't understood what she meant. 3 days later, she was dead. "Fell down the stairs," they said. "Broken neck." The sheriff called it an accident, but his mother had been careful, sure-footed. She had climbed those stairs thousands of times. And in the weeks before she died, she had been afraid of something. He'd seen it in her eyes, in the way she startled at sudden sounds, in how she checked the windows before dark. He had been too young, too caught up in his own life to ask the right questions. And then it was too late. Elias climbed the rickety steps carefully, testing each board. The door was unlocked. No one would steal from a cursed house. Inside, everything was covered in dust and mouse droppings. The furniture remained, rotting and mildewed. His mother's rocking chair sat by the cold fireplace, cobwebs strung between its arms. He walked through each room slowly, memory and grief washing over him in waves. In his mother's bedroom, he found the iron bed frame still there, mattress long since ruined. On the wall, a faded square showed where her mirror had hung. In his own old room, smaller, a child's bed remained. He had grown up here, learned to read at that small desk by the window. His mother had taught him letters by lamplight, patient and kind, even after long days of work. From his saddlebag, Elias pulled out the one thing he had kept from his mother's possessions, her Bible, leather-worn, pages soft with use. It had been her most treasured belonging. Inside the cover, in her careful script, Sarah Carter, seek truth and hold fast to it. He had carried this Bible for 15 years, but he had rarely opened it. The grief had been too sharp, the questions too loud. Now, standing in the ruins of his childhood home, he opened it. Pressed between the pages were wildflowers, dried and brittle. His mother had loved to press flowers, label them with dates and locations. A harmless hobby, he had thought, but as he carefully turned pages, he noticed something. The flowers were all from the last year of her life. and each one was marked with a location: the old freight station, the road to the mine, the back lot behind the bank. Why would his mother be pressing flowers from those particular places? A floorboard creaked behind him. Elias turned quickly, hand moving toward the knife on his belt. An elderly man stood in the doorway, hands raised in peace. Dr. Henley, the town's physician. He'd been old 15 years ago. Now he looked ancient, stooped and grey. "Didn't mean to startle you, son," Doc Henley said. His voice was still strong, though his body had weakened. "Saw you out here? Thought I should pay my respects." Elias relaxed slightly. "Doc, it's been a long time." "It has." The old man entered slowly, looking around the ruined room. "I was fond of your mother, Elias. She was a good woman. Better than this town deserved." There was weight in those words, something unspoken. "Doc, can I ask you something?" "You can ask. Can't promise I can answer." "My mother's death. You signed the certificate." "Accidental fall, you wrote." Doc Henley's face closed down, became careful. "That's right. Was it?" The silence stretched between them. Finally, Doc Henley sighed, a sound like wind through dead leaves. "Elias, some questions are better left alone. For your own safety. That's the second time today someone's warned me off. Makes me think maybe these questions need asking." The old doctor met his eyes, and Elias saw something there. Guilt, regret, fear. "If you're smart, you'll fix up this house and sell it. Take the money and go back to your mountains. Don't dig into the past. And if I'm not smart..." Doc Henley shook his head slowly. "Then God help you, boy, because no one else in this town will." He turned and left. Footsteps fading across the creaking floor. Elias stood alone in the gathering dusk, his mother's Bible in his hands, and knew with certainty what he had suspected for 15 years. His mother had not died by accident, and this house held the truth of what really happened. Elias began work on the house at first light. The mountain air had taught him to rise with the sun, and old habits held firm. He started with the roof. No point fixing the inside if rain would still come through. The work was hard but familiar. He had built his own cabin in the high country, learned carpentry from necessity and patience. There was something honest about working with wood and nail, about taking something broken and making it whole again. As he tore away rotted shingles, memories surfaced unbidden. His mother hanging laundry in the yard, white sheets snapping in the breeze. The smell of her bread baking, the sound of her voice reading scripture in the evenings, steady and sure as a heartbeat. By noon, he had stripped half the roof down to bare timber. Some of the beams would need replacing, but the main structure was sound. His mother had chosen well when she bought this house. The bones were good. He broke for a cold lunch, bread and cheese from his saddlebag, and walked through the interior again, this time with a carpenter's eye. The kitchen needed the most work. The sitting room was salvageable. The bedrooms just needed cleaning and fresh paint. In his mother's room, he began removing the old wallpaper. It peeled away in long strips, revealing the bare plaster beneath. The paper had been pale blue with tiny flowers, he remembered. His mother had hung it herself, so proud of how it brightened the room. He worked systematically, starting at the window and moving toward the door. The paper came away easily in some places, stubbornly clung in others. Behind the bed, where the wall met the corner, he found a section that felt different, slightly raised, as if something lay beneath. Elias worked carefully, peeling back the layers. The paper had been deliberately replaced here, glued down in multiple layers. Beneath it, fitted into a gap between two boards, was a small leather-bound book, his hands stilled. He drew the book out carefully, decades of dust falling away. It was a journal, his mother's journal. He recognized her handwriting on the first page. Private Reflections of Sarah Carter. January 1858, the year before she died. Elias sat down on the dusty floor, back against the wall, and began to read. The early entries were ordinary, observations about the weather, notes about her garden, thoughts on sermons she had heard. Her handwriting was neat and precise, the words of a woman who had taught herself to read as an adult and treasured the skill. But as he read forward through the months, the tone began to shift. March 15th, 1858. Saw something today I wish I had not. The freight wagons that came through town were marked for mining equipment, but when they unloaded at the old station, I saw the crates. They were far too small for drilling equipment, far too carefully handled. The men moved them as if they carried something precious or dangerous. March 30th, 1858. I've been keeping track. Every month the same wagons come through, always at night, always handled by the same men. Sheriff Maddox is always present, which strikes me as odd. Why would the sheriff oversee freight deliveries? April 12th, 1858. I asked Thomas Brennan at the store about the mining equipment. He said business was picking up at the old claims. But those claims have been empty for 15 years. I walked out there yesterday. No sign of any mining activity. No fresh digging, no equipment, nothing. So where do the supplies go? Elias felt his pulse quicken. His mother had been investigating something. Something that involved the sheriff and the general store owner. May 8th, 1858. I made a terrible mistake today. I was at the freight station checking the manifests in my capacity as town clerk. I thought I was alone, but Sheriff Maddox found me there. He asked what I was doing. I told him I was updating the municipal records. He smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "Best not to be too thorough with those records, Mrs. Carter," he said. "Sometimes too much attention to detail can be unhealthy. I'm frightened, but I cannot unsee what I have seen." The entries continued, each one adding another piece to a puzzle Elias was only beginning to understand. His mother had been documenting something systematic, a pattern of deliveries, of men meeting in secret, of money changing hands in ways that did not match the official records. June 20th, 1858. I believe they are smuggling something. But what and for whom? The operation is too organized to be simple theft. Someone powerful must be behind it. July 3rd, 1858. I saw J.T. today at the bank. He looked at me in a way that made my blood run cold, as if he knew, as if he was deciding something. I must be more careful. J.T. The initials appeared several times in the later entries, always with a sense of dread. August 15th, 1858. I have made copies of the shipping manifests. The official records do not match what I have witnessed with my own eyes. Crates marked as farming equipment, but farming equipment does not require armed guards, does not arrive only at night, does not get stored in locked warehouses behind the bank. August 29th, 1858. I am being watched. I know it. When I go to the market, someone is always nearby. When I walk to church, I see the same man across the street. They know I know, but what can I do? If I go to Sheriff Maddox, he is part of it. If I tell others in town, who would believe me? And who would be brave enough to stand against men with guns and money? September 10th, 1858. I have decided. I will gather proof, real proof, proof that cannot be denied, and I will take it to the territorial marshal. It is a 3-day ride to the capital, but it is the only way. I cannot let evil prosper in silence. I will not. The last entry was dated September 19th, 1858. I have everything I need. The manifests, the maps showing where the goods are stored, even samples I managed to take. Tomorrow, I will hide these materials where they cannot be found easily. Then I will prepare for the journey. I'm afraid, but I am also certain. Some things matter more than safety. Some truths must be told, whatever the cost. If anything should happen to me, I pray that Elias will one day understand why I had to do this. I love him more than life itself, but I love justice too, that was all. No more entries. 3 days later, she was dead. Elias sat in the dim room, the journal trembling in his hands. His mother had been murdered, not for knowing too much by accident, but for actively investigating a criminal conspiracy. She had gathered evidence. She had been planning to expose whoever was behind it, and they had killed her for it. The grief that washed over him was different now, sharper, hotter, not the dull ache of loss, but the bright pain of injustice. His mother had been brave. She had stood alone against powerful men, knowing the danger, doing it anyway because it was right, and they had taken her from him. He heard boots on the porch, heavy, deliberate footsteps. Elias stood quickly, tucking the journal inside his shirt, and walked to the front room. Sheriff Maddox stood in the doorway, blocking the light. He was a large man gone to fat, with a drooping moustache and small, watchful eyes. The star on his chest caught the afternoon sun. "Elias Carter," the sheriff said. His voice was rough, like gravel underfoot. "Heard you were back in town. Thought I should pay a visit." "Sheriff." Elias kept his voice neutral, though his heart hammered against the journal hidden beneath his shirt. "Working on the old place, I see." Maddox looked around, taking in the torn wallpaper, the exposed beams, the tools scattered about. "That's ambitious. House has been empty a long time. Figured it was time to fix it up." Maddox stepped inside, uninvited, his bulk filling the small room. "You planning to stay in Silver Creek, then? Thought you were a mountain man now. Living up in the high country, keeping to yourself. Plans change." "They do indeed." The sheriff walked slowly around the room, his hand resting casually on the pistol at his hip. It was a gesture meant to be noticed. "You know, your mother was well liked in this town. Her death was a tragedy. Terrible accident, so I was told. Thing about accidents, though, sometimes people go looking for trouble where there isn't any. Start asking questions, digging into things that are better left alone. That kind of curiosity can lead to more accidents." The threat was barely veiled. Elias met the sheriff's eyes steadily. "I'm just fixing up a house, Sheriff. Nothing more. See that it stays that way." Maddox moved toward the door, then paused. "One more thing. If you happen to find anything of your mother's while you're working, papers, documents, that sort of thing, you should know that official town records belong to the town. Wouldn't want any misunderstandings about that, so they knew, or suspected. They knew his mother had taken something, and they thought it might still be here." "I'll keep that in mind," Elias said. After the sheriff left, Elias stood in the empty house, his mother's journal pressed against his chest, and made a decision. He would finish what she started. He would find the proof she had gathered. He would expose whoever was behind her death, no matter how powerful they were. His mother had died for the truth. The least he could do was make sure the truth came to light. Outside, the sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of gold and red. Elias returned to the bedroom and continued removing wallpaper, working methodically, searching for whatever else his mother might have hidden. She had been clever and careful. If she had hidden the journal here, what else might be concealed within these walls? The house was full of secrets, and Elias Carter had time to find them all. Elias spent the next 3 days working on the house by day and reading his mother's journal by lamplight at night. Each reading revealed new details, new connections. His mother had been methodical in her investigation, noting dates, times, names, descriptions. The pressed flowers he had found in her Bible took on new meaning. Each one corresponded to an entry in the journal, each location she had visited, each piece of evidence she had gathered. She had marked with a flower pressed and dated. It was a map of her investigation, hidden in plain sight. March 17th, a blue wildflower from the old freight station. April 10th, yellow prairie flower from the road leading to the abandoned mines. May 10, white blossom from behind the bank building. She had been tracking something, documenting movements and locations, building a case with the patience of someone who understood that truth required evidence, not just suspicion. On the 4th morning, Elias made progress on the house's structure. The roof was now sound, new shingles overlapping in neat rows. He had replaced the porch steps and reinforced the floor joists in the kitchen. The work was satisfying, taking something broken and making it whole again, one board at a time. He needed more supplies. The general store was the only option in Silver Creek, which meant dealing with Thomas Brennan again. The store was busy when Elias entered, several women examining fabric, a rancher buying rope, children pressing their faces against the candy jar. Brennan stood behind the counter, measuring out flour for a customer. Elias waited his turn, studying the man. His mother's journal had mentioned Brennan several times, always with suspicion. TB was at the freight station again tonight. He seems to be keeping inventory of the shipments. When the other customers had left, Elias approached with his list. Brennan took it without expression, reading through the items, more nails, paint, window glass, tar paper. "Doing a thorough job on that house," Brennan observed, his tone neutral, trying to. "Must bring back memories." being in that place. It does. Brennan gathered the supplies, moving with deliberate slowness. Your mother worked as town clerk for a while. Did you know that? I did. Had access to all sorts of records. Shipping manifests, tax documents, municipal accounts. Brennan stacked cans of paint on the counter. Sometimes people with access to information get ideas. Start seeing patterns that aren't really there. And sometimes, Elias said quietly, patterns are there and people see them clearly. Brennan's hands stilled for just a moment. Then he resumed packing the supplies, his face carefully blank. That'll be $8.40. Elias paid in silver coin, counting it out carefully. As he gathered his purchases, movement in the back of the store caught his eye. The young Mexican man he had seen before was stacking crates, but he was watching Elias with an intensity that felt deliberate. Their eyes met. The young man glanced toward Brennan, then back to Elias, a slight shake of his head, a warning. Or perhaps something else. Elias loaded his supplies into the wagon and was about to climb up when he felt a tap on his shoulder. He turned quickly, hand moving instinctively toward his knife. The young man stood there, hands raised peacefully. Up close, Elias could see he was perhaps 20, with dark eyes and a nervous energy. "Senor Carter," he said softly, his English accented but clear. "My name is Miguel Reyes. I need to speak with you, but not here." "Too many eyes. What about?" "Your mother. She was kind to my family." "Very kind." Miguel glanced back toward the store. "Meet me tonight after dark. The old church, the one they don't use anymore on the north edge of town. I have information you need." Before Elias could respond, Miguel had slipped away, disappearing around the corner of the building. Elias drove back to the house, his mind working. Miguel had seemed genuinely nervous, genuinely eager to help, but why? And what information could he possibly have about Sarah Carter? He spent the afternoon installing new window glass, the delicate work requiring focus. But his thoughts kept drifting to the meeting ahead. Could be a trap. Could be someone trying to draw him out, make him vulnerable, but it could also be the break he needed. Someone willing to talk, to confirm what his mother had discovered. As the sun set, Elias prepared carefully. He cleaned and loaded his rifle, checked his knife, made sure he had matches and a small lantern. He left a note at the boarding house for Mrs. Calloway, sealed and marked, "Open if I don't return by morning." Inside, he had written everything he knew so far, along with the location of his mother's journal, hidden in a loose floorboard at the house. If this was a trap, at least the truth would not die with him. The old church sat at the edge of town, a small adobe structure that had been replaced by a larger, grander building 15 years ago. Now it stood empty, slowly crumbling back into the earth. Elias approached carefully, circling wide, watching for signs of ambush. The night was clear, stars bright overhead, the moon a thin crescent. He could see the church's dark silhouette against the lighter sky, no horses nearby, no obvious signs of waiting men. He entered through the side door, which hung loose on its hinges. Inside, the air smelled of dust and bird droppings. The few remaining pews were pushed against the walls, and the altar was bare. "Senor Carter." Elias spun, rifle coming up. Miguel stepped from behind a pillar, hands raised. "Please, I'm alone. I mean no harm. Why are we here, Miguel?" The young man moved to the center of the small church, to a spot where moonlight came through a hole in the roof. In the pale light, Elias could see tears on his face. "Because your mother saved my family," Miguel said, his voice thick with emotion. "And because my father died for knowing what she knew. And because I am tired of being afraid." Elias lowered the rifle slightly. "Tell me." Miguel took a shaking breath. "My father, he worked for Senor Thorne. At the bank, cleaning, doing repairs, whatever was needed. He was there at night sometimes, when he should not have been. He saw things, heard things. What things? Men meeting in the back rooms, counting money, so much money. More than a small-town bank should have. Crates being stored in the basement, crates that came on the freight wagons. My father, he knew something wrong was happening. He told my mother he was going to speak to someone, get help. Did he go to the sheriff?" Miguel shook his head bitterly. "Sheriff Maddox is part of it. Everyone knows, but no one speaks. My father went to your mother instead. She was town clerk, she had authority. She listened to him, she believed him. Elias felt something tighten in his chest. When was this? August, 5 years ago. My father met with your mother several times. He showed her how to get into the bank's basement, where the real records were kept. The ones they didn't show to the town council. And then what happened? Your mother started asking questions, looking at shipping records, comparing what was reported to what she witnessed. She was building a case, my father said. She was going to take it to the territorial marshal. Miguel's voice broke. But they found out. They killed her first, and your father. 2 months later, he had an accident at the bank. Fell down the stairs into the basement. Broke his neck. Miguel's hands clenched into fists. The same way your mother died. The same exact way. No one said anything. No one asked questions. My mother, she knew. She knew they killed him. But she was so afraid for my sisters, for me. She made us promise never to speak of it. Why are you speaking of it now? Miguel looked up, and in his eyes Elias saw the same determination he had seen in his mother's journal. Because I am old enough now to understand what my father died for. He died trying to stop evil men from hurting people. Your mother died for the same reason. And if we say nothing, if we let fear win, then they died for nothing. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. I kept this. Found it in my father's things after he died. My mother wanted to burn it, but I hid it. I didn't understand it then, but I kept it because it was the last thing he was working on before they killed him. Elias took the paper, unfolded it carefully. It was a torn freight receipt, faded but still legible. Dated July 1858, just 2 months before his mother died. The receipt showed delivery of mining equipment and industrial supplies to Silver Creek. Weight, 2,000 pounds. Delivered to First Bank of Silver Creek, rear entrance. Signed by Sheriff J. Maddox and countersigned by J.T., Elias said softly. Who is J.T.? Jacob Thorne, Miguel said. He owns the bank and the livery stable and half the businesses in Silver Creek. He came to town about 20 years ago with money, lots of money. Built the big house on the hill. Everyone says he made his fortune in mining up in Colorado, but Miguel shrugged. No one really knows, and no one asks. Jacob Thorne. The name meant nothing to Elias, but clearly it meant everything in Silver Creek. A man powerful enough to control the sheriff, to kill with impunity, to run a criminal operation in plain sight. What's in those shipments, Miguel? What are they smuggling? I don't know for certain, but I work in the store, I see things. The crates that come in marked as mining equipment, they're too small, too light, and they're handled too carefully, like they're fragile or valuable. My guess? Something that needs to be hidden, something illegal. Counterfeit money, Elias thought, or stolen goods. Something worth killing for. Thank you for this, Elias said, holding up the receipt. It's brave of you to come forward. My father would have wanted me to. Your mother would have wanted it too. Miguel moved toward the door, then paused. Be careful, Senor Carter. These men, they have killed before. They will kill again if they feel threatened. And they're watching you. Everyone is watching you. After Miguel left, Elias stood alone in the abandoned church, the receipt in his hand, and felt the weight of what he was undertaking. His mother had stood in this same position, knowing the truth, gathering evidence, preparing to act. She had been brave and careful and thorough, and they had killed her anyway, but she had also left him tools to finish her work. The journal, the pressed flowers marking locations, and now this receipt, proof of something wrong, something criminal. He was not alone in this. Miguel was willing to help. Doc Henley knew something, even if fear kept him silent for now. And his mother's careful investigation had left a trail for him to follow. Elias walked back to the boarding house through the dark streets, his hand on his rifle, his mind already planning the next steps. The house was coming together, board by board. So was the truth. And soon, very soon, Silver Creek would have to face what it had been hiding for 15 years. Elias began his systematic search of the house the next morning. He worked section by section, testing every floorboard for hollows beneath. tapping every wall for hidden cavities, checking rafters and ceiling spaces for anything concealed. His mother had been thorough in her investigation. She would have been equally thorough in hiding the results. In the kitchen, he pried up floorboards one by one, checking the space beneath. Just dirt and the occasional mouse nest. In the sitting room, he removed baseboards, examined the spaces behind them. Nothing. He was replacing a section of floor near the hearth when his pry bar struck something that rang with a hollow metallic sound. He froze, then worked more carefully, lifting the surrounding boards. Beneath the hearthstone, buried in the packed earth, was an iron box. Rusted but intact, about the size of a bread loaf, secured with a heavy padlock. Elias's hands shook slightly as he dug it free. The box was heavy, something substantial inside. He tried the lock, but it was solid despite the rust. He would need tools to open it without destroying whatever was inside. He was wrapping the box in canvas when he heard a knock at the door. Quickly, he lowered the box back into the hole and covered it with loose boards. "Come in," he called, standing and brushing dirt from his hands. The door opened and a woman entered. She was perhaps 30, with dark hair pulled back simply, and intelligent eyes that took in the room's disarray with a single glance. She wore a practical dress, suitable for work rather than show. "Mr. Carter. I'm Rebecca Chen. I teach at the school here." Elias remembered the name. Mrs. Calloway had mentioned her. A newcomer to Silver Creek arrived a few years back. "Miss Chen, what can I do for you?" "I brought these," she said, holding up a basket. "I heard you've been working long hours. Thought you might appreciate some proper food." Inside the basket were fresh bread, cheese, apples, and what looked like roasted chicken. The smell made Elias's stomach growl. He had been living on cold beans and hardtack. "That's very kind." "Thank you. May I come in?" she asked with a directness he appreciated. "I promise I'm not here to pry. But I am curious about someone willing to work this hard on a house everyone else has given up on." Elias hesitated, then nodded. Rebecca entered and looked around with genuine interest. "You've made real progress," she observed. "The roof looks sound. New windows. The bones of the house are good. My mother chose well when she bought it." Sarah Carter, Rebecca's expression softened. "I never met her. I arrived years after she died. But people speak of her when they think I'm not listening. Always in whispers, always with a kind of sadness. What do they say?" Rebecca was quiet for a moment, seeming to weigh her words. "They say she was kind, that she helped people who needed help, regardless of their station. That she asked questions other people were afraid to ask." She met his eyes. "And they say her death was very convenient for some very powerful men." Elias studied her, trying to gauge how much he could trust this stranger. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because I'm a teacher, Mr. Carter. My job is to seek truth and help others understand it. And I've been in Silver Creek long enough to know this town has a sickness at its heart. Something rotten that everyone knows about but no one will name." She set the basket down on the cleanest section of floor. "When I heard you'd come back to restore your mother's house, I thought maybe you were the kind of man who doesn't run from difficult truths. And if I am, then you should know you're not alone. There are people in this town who are tired of living with fear and lies. Not many, perhaps, but some." Before Elias could respond, they heard horses outside. Rebecca moved to the window and looked out, her face tightening. "That's Jacob Thorne," she said quietly. Elias came to stand beside her. A man was dismounting from a fine black horse, tall, perhaps 60, with silver hair and the bearing of someone accustomed to being obeyed. He wore an expensive suit, out of place in the rough frontier town, and walked with the confidence of ownership. Thorne came to the door without knocking, simply pushed it open, as if he owned the house already. "You must be young Carter," he said. His voice was smooth, educated, with an accent that suggested eastern cities and old money. He looked at Rebecca with mild surprise. "Miss Chen, I didn't expect to find you here." "I was just leaving," Rebecca said. She touched Elias's arm briefly, a gesture of support, and departed. Thorne watched her go, then turned his attention to Elias. "I've been meaning to pay you a visit. Welcome back to Silver Creek. Thank you. I understand you're restoring the property." Ambitious undertaking. Thorn walked around the room, examining Elias's work with the eye of someone who understood construction. You're doing quality work? Your mother would be proud. Did you know my mother? Something flickered across Thorn's face, too quick to read. Everyone knew Sarah Carter. She was very active in town affairs. Her death was a great loss. Sheriff Maddox said it was an accident. Indeed, tragic. Thorn paused by the hearth, and for a moment his eyes seemed to focus on the exact spot where the iron box lay hidden. But then he looked back at Elias. The reason I came by, Mr. Carter, is to make you an offer. I'm always interested in acquiring property in Silver Creek. I'd be willing to purchase this house and land from you at a very fair price. More than fair, actually. Enough that you could return to your mountains and live comfortably for years. The house isn't for sale. Everything is for sale at the right price. Thorn smiled, but the expression didn't reach his eyes. Think about it. You've been away 15 years. You've built a life elsewhere. Why tie yourself to this place, to these sad memories? Take the money? Start fresh somewhere else? I appreciate the offer, but no. Thorn's smile faded. I'm a patient man, Mr. Carter, but I don't like my offers refused, especially not when I'm being generous. Then I suggest you get used to disappointment. The temperature in the room seemed to drop. Thorn's pleasant mask slipped, and for just a moment Elias saw something cold and dangerous beneath. Your mother was a stubborn woman, Thorn said softly. It didn't serve her well. I'd hate to see you make the same mistakes she did. What mistakes were those? Involving herself in matters she didn't understand, asking questions that had perfectly good answers, if only she'd accepted them, refusing help from people who only wanted to protect her. Thorn moved toward the door. This town has an order to it, Mr. Carter, a way things work. People who understand that prosper, people who fight it suffer. That sounds like a threat. It's friendly advice. From someone who knew your mother and respects her memory. Thorn paused in the doorway. One more thing. If you happen to find any documents while you're working, old papers, town records, that sort of thing, they should be returned to the proper authorities. Technically, anything your mother had in her capacity as town clerk belongs to the municipal archives. So that was it. Thorn thought Sarah had hidden official records, evidence of his criminal operation, and he wanted them back before Elias found them. I'll keep that in mind, Elias said. After Thorn left, Elias stood very still, listening to the sound of hoofbeats fading down the road. Then he quickly moved to the hearth and uncovered the iron box again. He needed to open it. Now, before. Thorn decided that friendly offers weren't enough. Elias carried the box to the back room where his tools were stored. The padlock was old, the mechanism possibly rusted shut. He could break it off, but that might damage whatever was inside. Instead, he worked carefully with a thin file, feeling for the pins inside the lock. It was delicate work, requiring patience. The same patience his mother had shown in her investigation. After 20 minutes, he felt something give. The lock clicked open. Inside the box were papers, carefully wrapped in oilcloth to protect them from moisture. Elias lifted them out reverently. Shipping manifests copied in his mother's neat hand. Ledgers showing payments that didn't match official bank records. A detailed map of Silver Creek showing the freight station, the bank, the general store, and lines connecting them. And at the bottom, wrapped separately, were counterfeiting plates. Not the large printing plates, those would be too big to hide here, but the smaller engraving plates used for detail work. Serial numbers, fine scroll work, the delicate patterns that made currency difficult to forge. These plates alone were proof. Proof of the crime, proof of the conspiracy, proof enough to bring federal marshals down on Silver Creek like the hammer of God. But there was something else in the box. A photograph, the old type, a daguerreotype on a copper plate. It showed a young woman, his mother, perhaps 20 years old, standing beside a young man in a formal suit. Elias didn't recognize the man at first. He was younger in the photograph, his hair dark instead of silver, his face unlined. But the eyes were the same, cold, calculating, Jacob Thorn. And on the back of the photograph, in his mother's handwriting, "My wedding day. Before I knew what kind of man I had married, Before I understood that some mistakes can haunt you forever, Elias sat down hard, the photograph trembling in his hands. Jacob Thorne had been married to his mother. Jacob Thorne was... The implications crashed over him like a wave. The timing of the photograph, the year his mother had fled Silver Creek for a year before returning alone with an infant son. The way Thorne had looked at him, that moment of recognition. Jacob Thorne was his father. The man who had murdered his mother was his own father. Elias sat in the silent house, surrounded by evidence of betrayal and murder, and felt his entire understanding of himself crack and reform. He had come here to restore a house. He had thought he was investigating a crime, but this was something else, something deeper and more personal than he could have imagined. This was a family tragedy, and he was at its center. Elias spent 2 days alone in the house, working mechanically while his mind struggled with the revelation. He replaced boards and patched walls, but his thoughts were elsewhere, circling endlessly around the same bitter truths. Jacob Thorne was his father. The marriage certificate, carefully preserved in the box alongside the other evidence, confirmed it. Sarah Carter had married Jacob Thorne 2 years before Elias was born. She had fled the marriage while pregnant, obtained a divorce, and raised her son alone. The why of it was spelled out in letters Elias found folded with the certificate. Letters his mother had written but never sent, perhaps meant as a record for herself, or for him if he ever needed to understand. She had discovered Thorne's criminal activities within months of marriage. The counterfeiting operation had been smaller then, just beginning. When she confronted him, he had been charming at first, dismissive. Then when she persisted, threatening, he told me I could share in the profits or share in the consequences. One letter read, he said no one would believe a woman's word over his. He was probably right. But I couldn't live with that knowledge, couldn't pretend I didn't see what I saw. So I left, even though I carried his child. I chose poverty and honor over wealth and complicity. She had returned to Silver Creek years later because it was home, because she had nowhere else to go. Thorne had let her come back on the condition that she never speak of their past, never acknowledge their connection. He pretends Elias doesn't exist, another letter read. Walks past his own son in the street without a glance. Perhaps it's better that way. Better my boy grows up thinking his father is unknown than knowing his father is a criminal who cares for nothing but money and power. For 15 years, an uneasy truce had held. Sarah raised her son, worked as town clerk, kept her silence. Thorne built his empire, expanding the counterfeiting operation, corrupting the sheriff, buying influence, until Sarah's conscience wouldn't allow her silence anymore. The final letter was dated a week before her death. I cannot watch this town be destroyed by Thorne's greed. I cannot let innocent people suffer while evil prospers. Elias is grown now, capable of making his own way. If something happens to me, at least I will have tried to do what's right. And maybe someday my son will understand that some things matter more than safety. Some truths must be told, whatever the cost. Elias sat on the porch as the sun set, his mother's letters in his lap, and finally allowed himself to feel the full weight of grief. Not just for her death, but for the life she had lived, alone, afraid, but unbending in her principles. She had sacrificed everything for truth. Her marriage, her safety, ultimately her life. And what had he done? Run to the mountains, hidden from the hard questions. Let her death go unquestioned for 15 years. You're punishing yourself. Rebecca's voice came from the yard. She stood at the edge of the property, a shawl around her shoulders against the evening chill. May I join you? Elias nodded, unable to speak past the tightness in his throat. Rebecca climbed the steps and sat beside him, not too close, respecting his space. For a while they just sat in silence, watching the last light fade from the sky. I heard Jacob Thorne visited you, she said finally. News travels fast. In a small town, everything travels fast. She paused. He came to the school the next day, made a generous donation to our book fund, then suggested very politely that I should be careful about whose company I keep. That association with troublemakers could reflect poorly on a school teacher. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to cause problems for you. You didn't. Thorne did. She turned to look at him. And that's the thing about men like him. They want everyone to think they're generous benefactors, pillars of the community. They make donations and shake hands and smile. And all the while they're poisoning everything they touch. Elias found himself wanting to tell her everything. About the box, the evidence, the photograph, the terrible knowledge of his parentage. But the words stuck. Rebecca seemed to sense his struggle. Whatever you discovered in this house, it's weighing on you. I can see it. You don't have to tell me what it is. But I want you to know you don't have to carry it alone. The kindness in her voice broke something in him. The words came out in a rush, everything. The journal, the investigation, the counterfeiting ring. And finally, haltingly, the truth about Jacob Thorne being his father. Rebecca listened without interruption. When he finished, she was quiet for a long moment. That's a heavy burden, she said finally. Knowing the man who killed your mother is also your father. But Elias listened to me. She waited until he met her eyes. Blood doesn't make a man. Choices do. Jacob Thorne's blood might run in your veins, but his nature doesn't. You came back here to find the truth. You're willing to risk everything to honor your mother's memory. That's who you are, not him. Never him. Elias felt something ease in his chest, a knot loosening that he hadn't realized was there. What do I do with this? He asked. The evidence, the truth, all of it. What was your mother planning to do? Take it to the territorial marshal. Let the law handle it. Then that's what you do. Finish what she started. Rebecca stood, drawing her shawl tighter. But Elias, be careful. Once Thorne knows you have that evidence, he won't stop at threats. He's killed before. He'll kill again if he thinks it necessary. I know. Do you have somewhere safe to keep the evidence? Somewhere he wouldn't think to look. Elias considered. The house was the obvious place, but also the most vulnerable. Thorne knew his mother had hidden something. He would eventually try to search the property or simply burn it down. I'll think of something. Rebecca nodded. I live in the rooms above the schoolhouse. If you need a place to store something temporarily, something small, I can help. No one would think to look there. That's a risk for you. I'm a teacher, Elias, teaching people to think for themselves, to question, to seek truth. That's always been a risk. I'm not afraid of men like Jacob Thorne. She started down the steps, then paused. There's a meeting tomorrow night. Some of us in town who want to see things change. We meet at Doc Henley's house after dark. You should come. Who's us? People who remember what this town used to be before Thorne bought it. People who are tired of looking the other way. She smiled slightly. Not many of us, but enough. And growing. After she left, Elias went back inside and looked at the evidence spread across the table. The manifests, the counterfeit plates, the letters, the photograph. His mother had worked alone, gathering this evidence piece by piece, knowing the danger but persisting anyway. She had died before she could bring it to light, but he wasn't alone. Rebecca was willing to help. Miguel was willing to help. Doc Henley knew the truth and was burdened by his silence. Even Mrs. Calloway, with her careful words and sad eyes, seemed to be waiting for someone to finally speak the truth. Elias began carefully wrapping the evidence back in oilcloth. He would take Rebecca up on her offer, split the evidence between multiple locations, make sure it couldn't all be destroyed at once, and then he would ride to the territorial capital, just as his mother had planned. He would deliver the evidence to the marshal and let federal law come to Silver Creek. It was what his mother would have done, what she had died trying to do. And if Jacob Thorne was his father, well, that just meant he had even more reason to see justice served. The sins of the father didn't have to become the sins of the son. Elias could choose a different path. And he would. Outside, full darkness had fallen. But inside the Carter house, lamplight burned steady and sure, a small defiance against the night. The meeting at Doc Henley's house was smaller than Elias expected, just 6 people gathered in the physician's cramped sitting room. But as Doc pointed out, lighting his pipe with shaking hands, revolutions often started with small groups willing to speak truth. Besides Doc and Rebecca, there was Miguel and his mother, Rosa Reyes. a tired woman with fierce eyes who had lost her husband to Thorne's conspiracy. There was James Crawford, who ran the livery stable and had seen too many suspicious shipments pass through in the night. And there was Mrs. Calloway from the boarding house, who had kept quiet for too long and was ready to finally testify to what she knew. They sat in a circle, speaking in low voices, sharing what each of them had witnessed over the years. The pattern that emerged was damningly clear. Thorne had systematically corrupted or intimidated nearly everyone in a position of authority or influence. Sheriff Maddox was on his payroll. Thomas Brennan at the general store was complicit. Even the mayor, a weak man named Sutherland, did whatever Thorne told him to do. "It's been going on for nearly 20 years, Doc Henley said, his voice heavy with regret. "Started small, just some irregular shipments, some creative bookkeeping. But it grew, and everyone who noticed either joined up or learned to keep their mouths shut. Like my husband," Rosa said quietly. "He kept his mouth shut for years, until he couldn't anymore, until his conscience wouldn't let him sleep at night. And Sarah," Mrs. Calloway added, "she tried to do the right thing, and look what happened to her." Elias laid out the evidence he had found, the journal, the manifests, the counterfeit plates. He didn't mention the photograph or his connection to Thorne. Some truths were still too raw to share. The group studied the materials with a mixture of hope and fear. "This is enough," Crawford said. "This could bring down the whole operation. Federal marshals don't take kindly to counterfeiting, but getting it to them is the problem," Rebecca pointed out. "It's a 3-day ride to the territorial capital. Thorne has men watching the roads. If they catch Elias carrying this evidence, they'll kill him," Doc finished bluntly. "Just like they killed Sarah. Then we create a diversion," Miguel said. Everyone turned to look at him. The young man sat up straighter, warming to his idea. "We make Thorne think the evidence is in one place, while Elias rides out with the real evidence hidden another way. How do we do that?" Mrs. Calloway asked. "We let him think he's won," Elias said slowly, seeing where Miguel's thought was leading. "We stage a break-in at the house. Let his men find false evidence. While they're congratulating themselves, I slip out of town with the real materials." The group debated the plan, refining it. Rebecca would keep the most important documents at the schoolhouse. No one would think to look there. Miguel would spread rumors that Elias kept everything in a strongbox at the house. Crawford would prepare a fast horse, ready to go at a moment's notice, hidden at his livery stable. "When do we do this?" Doc asked. "Soon," Elias said. "Thorne is getting impatient. He knows I found something. The longer we wait, the more dangerous it gets." They talked for another hour, working out details, backup plans. When the meeting broke up, they left one by one, careful not to draw attention. Elias was the last to leave, except for Doc Henley. The old physician pulled him aside at the door. "There's something I need to tell you," Doc said. His hands were shaking worse than usual. "Something I should have told you years ago, but I was afraid. Still am afraid, truth be told. But you deserve to know. What is it?" Doc took a deep breath. "I delivered you when you were born. Your mother had been gone from Silver Creek for almost a year. Then she came back heavy with child. She never said who the father was, and no one dared ask. We figured it was some man from wherever she'd been. But you knew different. Not at first. But years later, when you were about 8 or 9, I saw you and Jacob Thorne standing near each other at the church social. The resemblance was—" Doc shook his head. "It was unmistakable once you knew to look for it. Same eyes, same way of standing, same stubborn set to the jaw. I asked your mother about it private-like. She didn't confirm or deny, just said some doors were better left closed, so others had known, or suspected. The secret Sarah Carter had tried so hard to keep hadn't been as secret as she thought. Does Thorne know?" Elias asked. "I believe he does. Always has. He stayed away from you growing up, never acknowledged you, but I think that was intentional. He had his reasons for wanting to pretend you didn't exist." Doc paused. "But Elias, he's not a sentimental man. If you become a threat to him, the fact that you're his blood won't protect you. Might even make it worse. He doesn't like being reminded of his failures." "His failures? Your mother?" She was the one person who stood up to him, who refused to be bought or frightened. She left him when most women in her position would have stayed. That must have stung his pride. And now here you are, doing the same thing she did. Standing up! Refusing to back down, Doc gripped Elias's shoulder. Be careful, son. A man like Thorn, he's most dangerous when he feels cornered. Elias walked back to the boarding house through dark streets, his mind churning. The plan was set. In 2 days, they would stage the break-in. 3 days after that, he would be delivering evidence to the territorial marshal if everything went according to plan. But plans had a way of falling apart. His mother had made plans too, and she'd ended up dead at the bottom of the staircase. The boarding house was dark when he arrived, just a single lamp burning in the window to guide late arrivals. Elias climbed the stairs quietly, not wanting to wake Mrs. Calloway. His room was at the end of the hall. He unlocked the door and stepped inside, and immediately knew something was wrong. The air smelled different, tobacco and sweat and something else, occupation. Close the door, Mr. Carter. Elias froze. Jacob Thorne sat in the room's only chair, positioned to see the door. He held no weapon, but Elias could see the outline of a pistol beneath his jacket. How did you get in here? I own the building. Mrs. Calloway rents it from me. Did you think I couldn't get a key? Thorne gestured to the bed. Sit down. We need to talk, you and I. Father to son, so he was acknowledging it. Elias remained standing, his hand near the knife on his belt. I have nothing to say to you, but I have something to say to you. So you'll listen, or this conversation will end badly for both of us. Thorne leaned back, deceptively relaxed. I know what you found in that house. Your mother was always too clever for her own good. She documented everything, gathered evidence, made her case like a lawyer building for trial. I imagine she hid it well, probably in multiple locations. Elias said nothing. The problem is that evidence could destroy me, destroy everything I've built over 20 years. I can't allow that. Thorne paused. But you're my son. I didn't raise you, didn't acknowledge you, didn't give you anything. And for that, I suppose, I owe you something. So I'm going to make you an offer. One time only. I'm not interested in your offers. $10,000, Thorne said. Gold, not paper. Enough to buy land, start a ranch, live well for the rest of your life. I'll have it delivered to any bank you choose, in any territory you want to go to. All you have to do is give me the evidence and leave Silver Creek tonight and never come back. You're trying to buy me off. I'm trying to save your life. Mine too, if I'm honest. But mostly yours. Thorne stood, and for the first time Elias saw something that might have been genuine emotion on the man's face. I killed your mother. I gave the order and my men carried it out. I've regretted it every day since, not because of the act itself, but because she was... He paused. She was the only person who ever saw through me, who knew what I was and refused to be impressed by it. I admired that about her even as it made her dangerous to me. If you admired her so much, why kill her? Because she left me no choice. She was going to destroy everything. I couldn't allow that. Thorne took a step closer. But you're different. You're my blood. My only child, though I never claimed you. Give me the evidence, take the money, and live. Have the life she wanted for you. Isn't that worth more than revenge? For just a moment, Elias felt the temptation. $10,000 was a fortune. He could disappear into the territories, build something real, never look back. But then he thought of his mother, pressing flowers between pages, documenting crimes at great personal risk, writing that some things mattered more than safety. She wanted me to have a good life, Elias said slowly. But more than that, she wanted me to have an honest one. She died fighting for truth. How could I dishonor that by accepting blood money from her killer? Thorne's expression hardened. Then you're a fool. Just like she was, maybe, but I'm her son, not yours. Blood doesn't make a man. Choices do. And I choose to finish what she started, even if it costs you your life. Even then, Thorne stared at him for a long moment, and Elias saw something shift in the older man's eyes. The last trace of paternal feeling, if it had ever really been there, vanished. So be it, Thorne said quietly. I offered you mercy. You refused it. What happens next is your own fault." He walked to the door, then paused with his hand on the knob. "Your mother said the same thing, you know. Right before the end. I choose truth." Those were her last words. "I hope they give you comfort when your time comes." Then he was gone, leaving Elias alone in the dark room, his heart pounding, his choice made irrevocably. There would be no more offers, no more chances to walk away. Jacob Thorne had just declared war on his own son, and Elias would have to be ready. Elias didn't sleep that night. He sat by the window, watching the street below, his rifle across his knees. Thorne's visit had changed everything. The pretense of civility was gone. Now it was just a question of who would move first. At first light, he went to the house and found Rebecca already there, sitting on the porch steps with a basket of breakfast. "I heard he visited you last night," she said without preamble. Half the town heard, probably. "He wasn't exactly quiet leaving the boarding house. How did you? Mrs. Calloway sent her son to tell me. She's worried about you." "We all are." Rebecca stood and handed him the basket. "Eat something." "You look like you haven't slept." "I haven't." Elias took the basket but didn't open it. "He offered me money. $10,000 to give him the evidence and leave town, and you said no." "I said no." Rebecca smiled, sad but proud. "Your mother would be proud." "Stubborn to the end, both of you." They went inside, and Elias showed her what he had been working on through the night, a detailed map of Thorne's entire operation, compiled from his mother's notes and his own observations. The freight station, the bank's basement, the routes the wagons took, the names of everyone involved. "This is incredibly thorough," Rebecca said, studying the map. "But Elias, you realize what this means. You're not just threatening Thorne now. You're threatening everyone who works for him. That's half the town, I know. They won't let you walk out of Silver Creek with this information. The moment you try to leave, they'll stop you. By force, if necessary. That's why we need to be smart about it." Elias pulled out another document, the plan they had discussed at Doc Henley's, now refined and detailed. "We move tonight. Can't wait any longer. Thorne's patience is gone, and if we hesitate, he'll act first." They spent the day preparing. Miguel brought supplies from the store, slipping them out when Brennan wasn't looking: rope, ammunition, provisions for a hard ride. Crawford at the livery stable prepared not one horse but two, both fast, both fresh. He also quietly passed word to the few men he trusted, asking them to be ready to create distractions if needed. Doc Henley prepared medical supplies and wrote out detailed testimony of everything he knew, in case he didn't survive to testify in person. Rosa Reyes packed food and warm clothes, treating Elias with the fierce care of a mother sending her son off to war. By late afternoon, the evidence was divided. The most crucial documents, the counterfeiting plates, the shipping manifests with Thorne's signature, the marriage certificate and letters, these Rebecca took to the schoolhouse. Hidden in a false bottom of her desk, the journal and supporting materials Elias kept with him, wrapped in oilcloth and secured in a leather pouch that could be worn under his shirt. If everything went wrong, if he was captured or killed, at least the evidence would be found on his body. They left decoy materials at the house, real enough to be convincing, but not the most damning items. These Elias placed in a conspicuous strongbox in his mother's old bedroom, locked but not well hidden. "You're setting a trap," Rebecca said, watching him work. "Using yourself as bait. Thorne knows I found something. He's going to come for it. Better he comes when I'm ready than when I'm not, and when he finds the decoy, then I'll already be halfway to the territorial capital." She was quiet for a moment. "And if something goes wrong? If he catches you before you can leave?" Elias met her eyes. "Then you take the evidence from the schoolhouse and find someone else to deliver it. Crawford maybe, or Miguel. But someone has to get it to the marshal. Promise me you'll be careful. I promise to finish what my mother started. That's all I can promise." As evening fell, Elias made his final preparations. He moved through the house one last time, remembering. This was where he had grown up, where his mother had raised him alone, where she had gathered the evidence that would cost her life. He had restored it, made it whole again. The roof no longer leaked. The windows were intact. The floors were solid. It looked like a home again, the way it had when his mother was alive, but he wasn't doing this for the house. He was doing it for her, for the principle she had died defending, for all the people in Silver Creek who were tired of living under Jacob Thorne's shadow. At full dark, he left the house and rode to the livery stable. Crawford was waiting with the horses, a big roan for speed and endurance, and a paint for backup in case something happened to the first. "Route's clear as far as I can tell," Crawford said in a low voice. "But Thorne's men have been riding patrol all evening. They know something's up. Can't be helped. We move tonight or not at all." Miguel emerged from the shadows leading another horse. "I'm coming with you." "No, it's too dangerous, which is exactly why you need someone watching your back. I know these hills, Senor Carter. I grew up hunting in them, and I'm a better shot than you think." He hefted a rifle. "Besides, my father rode with your mother when she was gathering evidence. It's only right I ride with you to deliver it." Elias wanted to refuse, but he saw the determination in Miguel's eyes. The same determination his mother must have seen in Miguel's father. "All right, but you do exactly what I say when I say it." "Understood?" "Understood." They rode out of town by a back way, avoiding the main street. The plan was to circle wide, make it look like Elias was still at the house, while actually putting miles between themselves and Silver Creek. Behind them, other parts of the plan were unfolding. Rebecca would be at the boarding house, visible, giving Elias an alibi. Crawford would make noise at the livery about Elias ordering a horse for tomorrow morning. Doc Henley would let it slip at the saloon that Elias had been asking about the best route to the mining district. Misdirection to send Thorne's men the wrong way. They rode hard for 2 hours, following game trails and creek beds, staying off the main roads. The moon was a sliver, giving just enough light to see by without exposing them too clearly. Miguel proved as good as his word, guiding them through terrain Elias barely remembered from childhood. The young man moved with confidence, reading the land in the darkness. Around midnight, they stopped to rest the horses in a small canyon. Elias checked the pouch under his shirt. The evidence was still secure. "So far, everything was going according to plan. How much farther tonight?" Miguel asked, giving his horse water from his hat. "Another few miles, then we'll find a place to hole up until dawn. Can't risk the horses in the dark anymore. Terrain gets rougher from here." A sound made them both freeze. Hoofbeats coming fast from the direction they had come. "They found out sooner than we thought," Elias said grimly. He counted the horses by sound. "At least 4, maybe more. Mount up. We need to move." They rode hard, pushing the horses close to their limits. The canyon narrowed, becoming a defile with steep walls on either side. Not ideal. If they were caught here, there would be no escape. The pursuing horses were gaining. Elias could hear shouts now, could see the flicker of torches behind them. "There's a side canyon ahead," Miguel said urgently. "Hidden entrance. I used to hunt there. We can lose them if we can reach it." They rounded a bend, and Miguel pointed to what looked like solid rock face. But as they approached, Elias saw it. A narrow cleft barely wide enough for a horse, invisible from any distance. They pushed through, rock scraping their legs. The space opened up into a small box canyon, surrounded by high walls. A dead end, but also a hiding place. "Quiet the horses," Elias whispered. They dismounted and held the horses' noses, keeping them from nickering. The sounds of pursuit grew closer, passed right by the hidden entrance, continued on down the main canyon. After several minutes, the sounds faded. The pursuers had gone past without seeing them. Miguel let out a shaking breath. "That was too close. They'll realize they lost us and come back to search. We can't stay here long." Elias studied the canyon walls. "Is there another way out?" "There's a trail, steep and narrow. A man can climb it, but not with a horse. We'd have to abandon them," Elias considered. The horses had served them well, but they were also a liability now, too easy to track, too noisy. On foot they could move quietly, hide more easily. "We go up," he decided. "Leave the horses here with water. Maybe we can retrieve them later, maybe not. But the evidence is more important than anything else." They unpacked what they could carry: food, water, rifles, ammunition, and of course the leather pouch with its precious contents. Elias took one last moment to pat the roan's neck, thanking the animal for its service. The climb was brutal, a steep game trail barely wide enough for one person at a time, with loose rock that threatened to give way with every step. It took them an hour to reach the rim, and by then both men were exhausted. Hands scraped raw from grabbing at rock and brush, but they had made it. And when they looked back, they could see torches in the canyon below. Thorne's men searching, angry, dangerous. "They won't find this trail in the dark," Miguel said. "By morning we'll have hours of head start. Then we'd better use them." Elias shouldered his pack and checked his rifle. 2 more days to the territorial capital. 2 days, and this will all be over. They set off into the night, 2 men on foot carrying evidence that would topple an empire. Behind them, Silver Creek slept, unaware that the reckoning it had feared for so long was finally at hand. The stars wheeled overhead, indifferent to the struggles of men. But somewhere in those stars, Elias liked to think his mother was watching. And maybe, just maybe, she was proud of him. He had kept his promise. He was finishing her work, and nothing, not Thorne's money, not his threats, not even the shared blood between them, would stop him now. The shot cracked across the valley, sharp and final, but it wasn't Elias who fired. It was Jackson, the young deputy who had taught to read by Sarah Carter. His bullet struck the ground at Maddox's feet, kicking up dust and stopping the sheriff's draw cold. "Next one goes higher, Sheriff," Jackson said, his rifle steady now. "I won't let you kill these men." "Not for Thorne, not for anyone." Maddox stood frozen, his hand halfway to his pistol, his face twisted with fury and fear. The 2 deputies, still loyal to him, looked between Jackson's rifle and their sheriff, uncertain. "Lower your weapons," Elias said, keeping his own rifle trained on Maddox. "All of you. This doesn't have to end badly." For a long moment no one moved. Then slowly, one of Maddox's loyal deputies let his rifle drop. The other followed suit, hands raised. Maddox, seeing his support collapse, finally let his hand fall away from his gun. The defeat in his posture was absolute. "It's over, Sheriff," Elias said quietly. "Your choice now is simple. You can come with us to the marshal's office and tell the truth about what Thorne has been doing. Or you can run and spend the rest of your life looking over your shoulder. If I talk, Thorne will kill me. If you don't talk, the federal government will hang you for murder and conspiracy. At least if you cooperate, you might see some mercy." Maddox seemed to age 10 years in as many seconds. His shoulders sagged. The badge on his chest, which he had worn with such authority for so long, now looked like a weight pulling him down. "I didn't want to kill her," he said, his voice barely audible. "Your mother. I tried to talk Thorne out of it, but he said she left him no choice. Said if we didn't stop her, we'd all hang. So instead, you murdered an innocent woman. We made it look like an accident. Quick, painless. That was mercy, wasn't it? Better than..." He stopped, realizing how hollow his justification sounded. "There's no mercy in murder, Sheriff. There's only guilt." Elias lowered his rifle slightly. "But there can be redemption in truth. Come with us. Tell the marshal everything. Let some good come from all this evil." Maddox looked at him for a long moment, then nodded slowly. He unbuckled his gun belt and let it fall to the ground. "All right, I'll talk. God help me, I'll talk." They walked into the territorial capital like a strange procession, Elias and Miguel in front, Maddox behind them with his hands bound, the 3 deputies who had switched sides flanking them, and the 2 still loyal deputies bringing up the rear. Disarmed but free, people on the street stopped to stare. Word spread quickly through the small capital that something significant was happening. The territorial marshal's office was a sturdy brick building near the government center. Marshal William Gaines was a gray-haired man in his 50s, with the weathered look of someone who had spent his life enforcing law in hard country. He listened to Elias's story without interruption, his expression growing darker as the narrative unfolded. When Elias finished and laid out the evidence, the journal, the manifests, the counterfeit plates, the letters, Gaines studied them with the careful attention of a man who understood their significance. "This is damning," he said finally. "Federal offense, multiple counts. If half of what you're telling me is true, we're talking about a major counterfeiting operation. "It's all true," Maddox said from where he sat, guarded by Jackson. "Every word. I can verify it all. Names, dates, amounts, 20 years of criminal activity. And I can tell you where the main operation is, the bank basement in Silver Creek. That's where they make the counterfeit currency. The plates, the presses, everything." Gaines studied the former sheriff with distaste. "You'll give a full deposition. And then you'll lead federal agents to the location. If you're lying, if this is some kind of trick, it's not. I'm done lying, done covering for Jacob Thorne. He's destroyed enough lives, including mine." The marshal stood and called for his deputies. Within minutes, the office was a hive of activity. Federal warrants being prepared, agents being briefed, a wagon being ready to transport equipment. "We'll move on Silver Creek tomorrow at dawn," Gaines told Elias. "I'm bringing 20 federal agents and a company of cavalry from the fort. Thorne won't be able to resist or escape." "Let me come with you," Elias said. "I need to see this through." Gaines considered, then nodded. "You've earned that right. But you follow orders once we're there. This is a federal operation now, and I don't want civilians getting hurt." "Understood." Miguel stepped forward. "I'd like to come too, Marshal. My father died because of Thorne. I want to see justice done. Same rules apply. But yes, you can come." That night, Elias stayed in a hotel room the Marshal arranged for him. Clean sheets, solid walls, a lock on the door. Safety after days of danger. He lay in the darkness, holding his mother's Bible, and allowed himself to feel the weight lift. He had done it. He had completed her mission. Tomorrow, Jacob Thorne would face the consequences of his crimes. Tomorrow, Sarah Carter's death would finally be avenged, and a small town that had lived under fear for too long would finally be free. Elias slept deeply that night, his mother's Bible on the table beside him, and for the first time in 15 years, he did not dream of her falling. Instead, he dreamed of her smiling, proud, at peace. The morning would bring reckoning. But tonight, there was rest. The federal agents arrived in Silver Creek like a force of nature, 20 armed men riding in formation, backed by cavalry, with Marshal Gaines at their head. It was barely dawn, and most of the town was still sleeping. Elias rode with them, as did Miguel, both wearing deputy badges Gaines had provided for the operation. They approached from the east, the rising sun at their backs, casting long shadows ahead of them. The first stop was the bank. Gaines posted men at every exit, then knocked firmly on the front door. When no one answered, they broke it down. Inside, they found the night watchman, wide-eyed and terrified. He surrendered immediately, pointing them toward the basement without even being asked. What they found there confirmed everything. The basement had been converted into a sophisticated counterfeiting operation. Large printing presses, engraving equipment, racks of drying paper stamped with counterfeit currency. The smell of ink and chemicals was overpowering. 2 men were working the night shift. They looked up in shock as federal agents poured down the stairs, then wisely raised their hands. "Secure all evidence," Gaines ordered. "I want every piece of paper, every plate, every tool documented and packed for transport. This needs to be ironclad in court." Next, they went to Thorne's mansion on the hill. The large house stood proud above the town, a symbol of wealth and power. But that power was about to fall. Thorne met them at the door, already dressed despite the early hour. He had clearly been warned, probably by one of his men posted to watch the roads. But there was nowhere left to run. "Marshal Gaines," Thorne said calmly, as if receiving an expected guest. "To what do I owe this intrusion?" "Jacob Thorne, you're under arrest for counterfeiting, conspiracy, and murder. You have the right to—" "I know my rights." Thorne's eyes found Elias in the crowd of agents. Something flickered across his face, regret, perhaps, or simply resignation. "You finished what she started." "I suppose I should have expected that. You're more like her than I wanted to admit." "Yes," Elias said quietly, "I am." Agents moved through the house, finding more evidence, ledgers, correspondence, bank records that showed the extent of the operation. It had been vast, reaching beyond Silver Creek into 3 territories, involving dozens of men. Thorne hadn't just been running a counterfeiting ring. He had built a criminal empire. As they led Thorne away in chains, the town began to wake. People emerged from their homes to watch in shock as federal agents moved through Silver Creek, making arrests. Thomas Brennan at the general store. 3 of Thorne's lieutenants. The mayor, who had been complicit through his cowardice and willingness to look the other way. By noon, it was over. The main conspirators were in custody, the evidence secured, the operation shut down. Elias stood in the town square, watching the agents work, and felt Rebecca's hand slip into his. She had been waiting at the edge of town, watching the whole thing unfold. "It's really over," she said softly. "The arrests are over. The trials will take months. But yes, the important part is over. What will you do now?" It was a good question. Elias had been so focused on this moment, on seeing justice done, that he hadn't thought beyond it. He looked around Silver Creek, at the boarding house where Mrs. Calloway was weeping with relief, at the general store where Miguel was helping federal agents catalog evidence, at Doc Henley standing on his porch with shoulders that finally looked unburdened, and he looked toward the edge of town, where the Carter house stood, restored and solid. "I think I'll stay," he said, "at least for a while. Someone needs to testify at the trials. And the house is finally finished. Seems a shame to leave it empty again," Rebecca smiled. "The school could use a maintenance man, someone to fix things, keep the building in good repair. It doesn't pay much, but I'm not worried about pay." Elias squeezed her hand gently. "And I think my mother would approve. She always valued education." Over the following weeks, the story unfolded in courtrooms and newspapers. The trial was sensational, a territorial scandal that reached all the way to Washington. Jacob Thorne was convicted on multiple counts and sentenced to 30 years in federal prison. Sheriff Maddox, in exchange for his testimony, received a lighter sentence but would still spend a decade behind bars. Others received varying punishments based on their level of involvement and willingness to cooperate. Some, like Thomas Brennan, fought the charges and received harsh sentences. Others, like young Deputy Jackson, who had found the courage to do the right thing at the crucial moment, faced no charges at all. Through it all, Sarah Carter's name was cleared and honored. The territorial governor issued a posthumous commendation, recognizing her courage in investigating the conspiracy. A letter from the governor's office arrived at Elias's house, praising his mother's dedication to truth and justice. Elias had that letter framed and hung in the sitting room, next to the restored photograph of his mother in her garden, smiling among the flowers she loved. 6 months after the arrests, Elias stood on the porch of the Carter house, his house now, truly his, and watched the sunset paint the sky in shades of gold and crimson. The garden was beginning to come back, planted with seeds from his mother's pressed flowers. Rebecca had helped him plant it, and Miguel had helped dig the beds. The town had changed. With Thorne's empire dismantled, Silver Creek was slowly finding its way back to honesty. It wasn't perfect, no place was, but it was better. People walked a little taller. They looked each other in the eye. The fear that had permeated everything for so long was finally lifting. Elias opened his mother's Bible, now worn even more from constant reading, and found the page where he had recently made his own entry. Using her style of careful notation, he had written, "The house is restored. The truth is known. Justice is served. Some debts can only be paid with courage, and she paid hers fully. I've tried to do the same. I hope I have made her proud. I know I have honored her memory. And that, in the end, is all a son can do for a mother who gave everything for what was right." He closed the Bible gently and looked out at the land his mother had loved. Tomorrow he would continue his work at the school. He would tend the garden. He would build a life in this place that had been marked by so much sorrow but was now healing. He had come home to restore a house, but in the process he had restored something more important: truth, justice, and his mother's honor. Sarah Carter had died fighting for what was right. Her son had lived to finish that fight, and in a small town in the territories, where justice had nearly been lost forever, one man's determination had made all the difference. The sun sank below the horizon, and Elias Carter went inside his mother's house, his house now, and closed the door behind him. Not shutting out the world, but finally, at long last, coming home.